Hello and welcome to our final lesson on the B7 topic. So in B7 we've been looking at risk factors, communicable diseases, and today we're going to have a think about how we can analyse and evaluate data. So as a starter, there is a question on the board. It says, is global warming caused by the decline in pirate numbers? And you need to have a think about the graph shown. So if you could pause the video now, have a good think about the graph. Can you say whether global warming is caused by the decline in pirate numbers? Okay, so you should have paused the video at that point. You should have had a think about the starter that's shown on the screen at the moment. Now, if you looked at the graph properly, you could have said that the graph shows what's known as a correlation between global average temperature and the number of pirates. As the temperature is increased over time, the number of pirates has gone down. If you looked at this graph closely, it was going down in numerical value as you move along the x-axis, while the y-axis showed global temperature, and that was going up. So this graph actually shows that as temperatures increased, the number of pirates has gone down. Just because there is this correlation doesn't mean that global warming is causing the lack of pirates. If you look back at the question, it says, is global warming caused by the lack of pirates? It's saying, is global warming caused by the fact that the number of pirates is going down? Now, we can't say that. We can't say less pirates causes global warming. Correlation is different from causation, which we're going to have a look at today, and it's a very important distinction, but it's a big misconception. It's something that people often get wrong, okay? So today's title, as you would for any other lesson, you need to write in your books, Analysing and Evaluating Data. By the end of the lesson, you should be able to convert information between graphs and numbers. You should be able to identify correlations from scatter diagrams, and you should be able to evaluate graphs to determine the strength of evidence. So, if we can start our lesson, and we'll start by writing on the board. Scientists often look at variables and they look for links between those variables, okay? So we can say scientists study variables and look for links between them. For links between them. Okay? So essentially, what scientists do, the job of a scientist, is they look at variables, things that can change on their own, and they try to see which is affecting which. Okay? How are variables affecting each other? Now, just for your benefit, we're going to define the word variable. Variable is a very important word for you, particularly when we're thinking about required practicals. You need to know about independent, dependent, and control variables. But if we say something is variable, we can define it as something that can be changed. So something that can be changed. Okay. Now, it's often easier to see if there's links in data if we place it on a graph. The reason we draw graphs is because it's easier to see if there's links between the data. So we can say it is easier to see links between data if it is drawn on a graph. Okay? Now, data is a word that pupils and people in the general public often get confused. So that's going to be our second keyword, data. Remember, all keywords are written in green. You need to be able to define them and use them. Now, data in science can be defined as facts and statistics, facts and statistics that can be collected for analysis. Facts and statistics collected for analysis. Okay? Now, this can be a number of things. Data could be somebody's opinion. It could be a measurement of some kind. These are all examples of data. So we can just put underneath here, we can say, e.g., opinions / measurements These are examples of data, okay? Now, data is usually given in the form of a number. However, as terms of opinions, it can also be given as a verbal account or a written account, okay? So we can just add underneath here for data, and I'm going to put it in red because it's important. We can say, usually in numerical form. Okay. Now, for GCSE Biology, you need to be able to interpret graphs. That is the biggest part of GCSE Biology in terms of maths that you need to be able to do. You need to be able to look at a graph and you need to be able to say, this graph shows this and here is my evidence. You need to be able to look at a graph, say what it shows and say whether it supports or doesn't support a particular idea or hypothesis. Okay? So I'm going to give you some rules that you should always follow when you're interpreting a graph. So we can say, I'm going to put it in fact we'll go this colour orange so it's different. We can say when trying to interpret graphs, when trying to interpret graphs, we should do the following. We should do the following. Colon, so we're going to go through some lists. So number one, you should identify patterns and trends. What we mean by this is, does the graph go up? Is it a positive correlation? Does it go down? Is it a negative correlation? Is there no correlation at all? So we can put next to this, e.g., positive correlation / negative correlation. I can fit it on, just about. So identifying patterns is saying whether there's a correlation or not. Okay. The second factor, or the second thing you should do, is you should always use the axes, the axis labels. Now, this is important because you should never say, oh, there's a positive correlation, You should say that there is a positive correlation between the rise in temperature and the chances of a fire happening. Okay, I'm just making this up off the top of my head, so I do apologise. But you should always refer to the axis label titles. So you always use the axis labels. So we can say, e.g., as temp or temperature goes up, as temperature goes up, reaction rate goes up. Okay, so it's not good enough to say there is a positive correlation. You would need to look at a graph and say there is a positive correlation because as the temperature goes up, the reaction rate goes up. Okay. The third thing is you need to focus on is you need to point out defining features. So number 3, point out defining features. Okay? Now, what I mean by pointing out defining features is that you should always point out what the highest is, what the lowest is, the range, and any anomalies. So we can put e.g., highest, lowest, anomalies, these are all examples of defining features. And the final one, number 4, you should always quote numbers. Always quote numbers. And that's an important one. Most people miss that one. So I'm going to underline it in red, because it's really important. You should always quote numbers from a graph. They have given you a graph for the reason. So make sure you quote from it. So you can say, for example, e.g., when temp or temperature, I'm just going to put temp, was 20 degrees Celsius, rate of reaction was 0.7. I'm just making this up, okay? Notice that I've used numbers directly from the graph. So if ever you get a question asking you to analyse some data or look at a graph, these are the 4 things you need to do to get full marks. You should always say any patterns. Is there a positive correlation? Is there a negative correlation? Is there no correlation at all? You should always refer to the axis labels. So as temperature goes up, reaction rate goes up. Notice how I'm talking about the X and the Y axis. Point out defining features. What was the highest value? What was the lowest? Were there any anomalies? And finally, always quote numbers. So you need to back this up. You need to back up everything you've said by saying, for example, when temperature was 20 degrees Celsius, the rate of reaction was 0.7. So, if we just refresh this screen, we send it back to black, turn back to our pen, and we're going to start with a keyword. Our next keyword, and this is an important one, is the word correlation. Correlation. Correlation can be defined as an association between 2 random sets of data. So rather than association, I'm going to use the word link. In fact, we'll put both down. And association, help if I can spell association, / link between two sets of data. Okay? Now, just because two sets of data are linked, it doesn't mean that one is causing the other. So if we think back to our starter even, yes, there is a correlation between the temperature of the Earth and the number of pirates. However, we can't say that this increase in temperature has caused the number of pirates to go down. We can't say that. There would be a number of factors at play, not just global temperature. So I'm going to add underneath here in red, I'm going to say correlation does not show that the variables affect each other. Okay? So it doesn't show that they affect each other. We can say semicolon. Other variables could be causing this correlation. Now, to summarize this in a single sentence, there is a perfect phrase you can use, okay? The phrase you can use, and we talk about this a lot at A level, is that correlation does not show a causal link. At A level, traditionally, we say that correlation does not show causation. What we're saying is, just because two factors are linked doesn't mean that they are causing each other. Okay? So what's important is that we evaluate data to think about causal links. And we need to think about certain things when we evaluate data. So we can say, when evaluating data, comma, we need to think of ... Number one, is the data reliable? Where has it come from? So we need to think, is the data reliable? For example, there may be a study saying that Coca-Cola is the most healthiest thing in the world for you. They might say that Coca-Cola is the wonder drink that can cure all of your ailments. However, if that data has been collected by the Coca-Cola company, it's not really reliable because they want you to buy their Coca-Cola. The second one, number two, is the data valid? So is the data valid? What we mean by this is, could somebody do that again? Could somebody do this study again and get the same results? If you analyze your data, when you interpret the graph, does it show what they're claiming it shows? Number three, and this is a very important one, this seems to be an examiner's favourite at GCSE, so I'm going to put it in red. Is the sample big enough? Is the sample size big enough? Now, I want you to imagine that I do a study at our school, and I say from our study that girls are much better at football than boys. Let's assume that we played a football game, the girls versus the boys, and the girls won. And I leave our school and say, well, girls must be better at football than boys because the girls won. However, that's only looking at one school. Think how many schools there are in our area, and then think how many schools there are in the West Midlands, and think how many schools there are in England. Think how many schools there are in the world. It's not fair to just look at one small group of people and assume that it will be the same for everyone. Okay? The next one, number 4, when we're evaluating the data, we need to think, how was the data collected? Now, an example of this would be, I want to do a study looking at how healthy people eat. Rather than me physically watching what they eat, I give them a questionnaire and say, what did you have for dinner? People might be very self-conscious and say, oh, Mr. Abraham, all I had was chicken breast and an apple. That's all I eat every day, a chicken breast and an apple. But in actual fact, what they're doing is they're having a McDonald's every single day. I haven't collected my data very reliably. Therefore, my data is not very reliable. People can lie. Okay? Number 5. Are there any anomalies? So number 5. Are there any anomalies? Are there any anomalies that can't be explained? So, are there any anomalies that can't be explained? Some can be explained, but not all of them. If there's anomalies that can't be explained, then the data is less reliable. The final one, and we have alluded to this earlier, number 6, are the researchers biased? Are the researchers biased? So, the people carrying out the study, have they got anything to gain from having a particular outcome? If they have got something to gain, then they could be biased. They could sort of angle the study in a way so that they gain from it. So, you should now be able to tell me how information can be converted between graph and numbers. You should be able to identify correlations from a scatter diagram, and you should be able to evaluate graphs to determine the strength of evidence. If we were at school, we would have been doing this experiment. We would have had the whole class, and I have got the hypothesis that if you are tall, you will have big hands. What we would have done is we would have gone around the classroom, not the school, and we would have measured everybody's height, and we would have measured their hand width. We would have then plotted their graph with height along the x-axis and hand width up the side. So we would have had height along the x-axis and hand width up the side. Now, you are more than welcome to carry this out at home. However, if you do carry it at home, you probably won't have a big enough sample size. So, rather than having hand width up the side, what we would have had is a frequency graph. Okay? So, frequency, no, sorry, not along the top. We would have had frequency of height. So height, frequency, okay? So we would have had a range of them along the bottom with hand width up the side. And what we would have found is that the graph would have made what's known as a bell curve. That's beautiful, that is. Look at that. So you would have had the average height with a particular value in the middle, the most common values in the middle, and along the outer edges you would have had people who are more anomalous. And you would have seen that height and hand width, there isn't really a correlation. Okay, some people can be tall who are tall with small hands, and there are some people who are short with very large hands. Okay. What I would like you to do for the remainder of this lesson, I've attached some worksheets to the Google Classrooms. I would like you to have a go at those worksheets, please. If you have any questions about what we've spoken about today, please either comment below or drop me an email, and I will get back to you as soon as I can. Thank you.